Welcome to Catch Her Spark with Jen Maldonado. These are conversations with women who are building meaningful careers, stepping into leadership, and designing life on their own.
Oh my God, people, I have an amazing woman you're about to hear about because most people think of fashion as an expense, something you buy, something you wear, and eventually you forget about it. But what if that's not the full picture? What if some of the things sitting in your closet right now are actually assets? Today's conversation is with someone who saw that differently and built a business around that. So Katey Blair started in design, but over time she began to notice something most people overlook: value sitting unused. I'm talking about luxury pieces, high quality items, things that still held demand, but were not being treated that way. So, what started as a high side hustle for her quickly turned into something much bigger. And today she is thrifty like that, a luxury resale business where she worked with clients to turn their closet into opportunities. And of course, while also outsourcing unique, high value pieces and building a brand around it. So, everybody, please help me welcome Katey. Katey, how are you today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. I am super excited to hear about your story. Tell us, let's start with what you do specifically, because I think people will be fascinated with your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started She's Thrifty like that about 4 to 5 years ago. And it started as really just like a passion because I liked to go to the Goodwill bins and search for treasure. And I've always been passionate about, sustainability and resale and thinking that there's just so much waste in the world that, a lot of people go out and they might buy something and then never use it and donate it and then it might end up in a landfill or something. And I think there's a lot of those pieces that still hold a lot of value. So when I started She's Thrifty like that, I was just going to the Goodwill bins, which I'm not sure if you know what that is, but it's where it's basically like Goodwills before they get thrown away officially from Goodwill. They put a ton of pieces in bins and you just go through them and you pay by the pound. So I would go there and I would search for pieces that were almost about to be discarded, but I felt like still were excellent pieces that had life left, and I would resell those. And that slowly grew into me now working with a lot of consignment clients. So I will go through their closets and pick out pieces that I find still have value, but they don't want them necessarily anymore. And then I will help those find a new home. So that's how She's Thrifty like that has kind of grown into basically my full-time business.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
fascinating. So you take your passion, what you value in the world, and you just piece it together to create something of even higher value.
exactly.
Definitely.
Yes.
Creating an asset out of nowhere based on what you love. I
Yes.
love it, Katey. Now, how this started, how you got inspired to do this.
Really, it just came from my love of clothes. So I've always been obsessed with fashion. And, I think my background, so I used to work in design, and I was a designer at Nike, and it was a great job, but I definitely saw just like how much, waste the fashion industry goes through, especially when you work in it and you work like behind the scenes. I don't think a lot of people realize like I think the fashion industry is like the number two, like pollution or use of water in the world. And there is just so much waste that comes out of that. And so not only was I able to combine my passion for clothing, but also saving pieces that otherwise would have just probably been discarded or potentially thrown away. Um, and that's kind of how the business was basically created in it. And it grew from there to then working with clients. So I really didn't work with clients until maybe about 2 years ago, when I started realizing, I could make connections and work with people that have fantastic pieces in their closet, but maybe they wore something once for an event and then they never needed to wear it again. And that can find a new home with somebody else that will also wear it. And then it's kind of like the recycling clothing, as long as these pieces, people take good care of them. And, it's not necessarily like fast fashion pieces. I look for pieces that are timeless or really, really fabulous, or even vintage pieces that still have a lot of life left. So, yes.
I love it. I love vintage clothes too. And
Yes.
it's hard to find, to your point, something that is timeless. But once you find it, it's like, I don't want to let that go.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many people. I mean, it's wild to see, especially in Dallas, like people spend so much money on clothing, and there's definitely a big market for it here, certainly. So,
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, I have a question for you. What is like a common misconception in what you do?
oh gosh, that's a good question. I think a common one is that, I say a lot of time that I'm like a professional thrifter. And I think a lot of people might think that, I'm like I buy trash. I think that's a common misconception in this world, or that like um I'm going to stores and I'm finding pieces, and there's no value left in them. I think that's a really common misconception. I know when I first started this, like a lot of my friends kind of were like, so what do you do exactly? Like, what do you look for? And my knowledge has grown so much too. I mean, when I first started doing this, I can admit that there were definitely things that I would pick up that certainly didn't hold any value, or maybe they weren't super nice pieces, but that knowledge after 4 or 5 years of having this business has grown a ton. But I think that's a really common one, is that people think like, ew, she's just picking up like really worn pieces or stuff that like is nobody wants anymore, which really isn't the case. I'm pretty choosy about what I source and where my pieces come from, so that I'm making sure that what I'm putting back into the market holds that value and is going to be loved by the future customer. So,
Yeah, I love it. So you have spent more time with your customer for 4 or 5 years. Now you get to learn even more what they value. Are
yeah.
you seeing some trends in the process now that we're talking about that?
Oh gosh, yes, tons. And it's crazy in this world, how a brand one year can have really high value. For example, I think Lululemon is a really good example. When I first moved to Dallas, everybody was in Lululemon. And, I couldn't hang on to it for more than maybe 24 hours. Like it would sell overnight. Whereas now, a couple of years later, I have a hard time getting like selling it. So it's really interesting how that's just a specific brand that has really changed in value in the resale world. Whereas there's other brands now that are brand new that have recently gained in popularity. That like Park is a really good example. I don't know if you know that brand, but I know that was started by an influencer, and like those sweatshirts sell like crazy, whereas that brand didn't even exist a couple years ago. So it's really important to stay on top of these trends too, and know what people are buying and what people are looking for, because they're changing constantly. So it's definitely,
Yeah.
you gotta stay on top of it.
Yeah, I mean the fashion industry, it's a little bit heartless, I would say, when it comes to
Yeah.
trends.
Absolutely. And it changes at the top of the hat. And now, of course, with social media and everything,
Yeah.
you could have a brand really popular one day, and then something happens, or they choose to work with the wrong person or something, and then the next day it's become unpopular to wear that brand. So it absolutely, it can be unforgiving.
Yes, that is super interesting. I have a lot of friends, they're more into the model side and fashion side, but they tell me about all of these changes and how quick happens.
Oh yeah.
And for you, like, let me ask you this from the business side, how quick do you have to adapt in your business in order to continue to be profitable?
Yes, and sometimes there's times where I will go and I'll source pieces, and these would come from me sourcing, not from a consignment client necessarily. And it'll be something that previously sold really well for me, and so I'm thinking, okay, if I go pick this up again, it's going to sell well again, and that might not be the case. And sometimes I just have to cut my losses, or take potentially just take a loss on an item that used to have value that no longer does. So that I think that's a good example of sometimes like, I just have to be okay with like, it's an ever changing or constantly changing business, and it's not always going to be a win. And that's just something you have to know when you own your own business.
Yep,
Yeah.
100%.
And it's
100%.
sometimes that sucks. Like sometimes you're really excited about a piece and then it doesn't move, or you just end up like nobody I thought this was cool but nobody else did, and again that's just part of being in sales.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. And hey, question for you. What do you really enjoy the most out of your work?
I love, well, my favorite part is getting really good reviews, or making somebody's day. If I've found a piece and then somebody purchases that piece from me and they leave me a great review, or I'm able to work with them to like find something that they're really looking for. I've had people reach out to me through social media and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a dress for like a bridal party, for a bachelorette party for myself, or for a birthday, or something special." And being able to find that piece and sell it to them and that gives me a lot of joy, because I almost feel like in a sense I'm kind of like a personal shopper at that point. Um, and then of course, seeing pictures and seeing how happy they were, like that's big time, especially if I can get somebody a really good deal on a hard to find item. I think that's what gives me a lot of joy as well. And also knowing that a piece that somebody no longer wanted is now getting to a new home to somebody who will love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Now, are your clients mostly looking for a specific pieces? Do you work with executive entrepreneurs, business owners for that type of attire? What is your type of clients, or who is the people that comes to you often?
Yeah, so most of the people that shop from me will probably be finding me either through my social media or on all of my selling platforms. So a lot of people that buy from me, I don't necessarily know personally. Now, if there's people that follow me on Instagram that will buy directly from me through either my story sales, or when I post, like I'll do thrift hauls and people can shop directly through my thrift hauls that I post on my Instagram and on my YouTube. Um, then I'll be able to work with them more directly than versus somebody that just finds me on maybe Poshmark or eBay or Depop or something. So that's usually how they would shop with me. The people on these platforms are probably looking for something a little bit more specific,
Mhm.
because then they can search for items, versus people on my Instagram or YouTube, if they see something in my thrift haul, it might be more of like an impulse buy, seeing something that they really like and then they can just shop directly from me. So that's kind of I kind of work with clients a little bit differently in that sense of sales versus like my clients that I work with that come to me and want me to do consignment through them. Um, they usually find me through social media, and then I usually will have people either send me pictures of what they want or what they're interested in consigning, and then I'll help them decide like here are the pieces that I think would have some value. Here's the pieces that might just be better, to take maybe to a buy sell trade store, or just donate. Just depending on the item and what the value might be, the resale value might be, and condition, brand, that type of stuff. So
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. I love it. Now, I want to move on to and getting to know you, Katey,
yeah,
right? So we know you have a very successful business and I'm so excited for you. And
thank
I also
you.
want to know more about you so the audience can get to know who is Katey, right? Because
Yeah,
I guess that we evolve and you started in corporate, now you are in your business. So
yeah.
I really want to ask you this question around what does success mean to you today, right? That it wasn't the same in the past.
Oh, that's a great question. So I think the definition of success has changed a lot for me personally, going from working in corporate to working for myself. when I worked in corporate, I think success looked like, a really nice paycheck every 2 weeks that I knew was always going to come in. And, success looked like hitting my corporate goals, having really good reviews with my managers, potentially like moving up that corporate ladder. I think that is what success looked like to me back when I did work in the corporate world. And it's changed so much now because, I'm not managed. I manage myself. Not having a manager and not having somebody like that's always there being like, okay, you have to hit this mark or you have to, make sure that you have this done by the end of the week. So to me, I mean, obviously money is still correlated to success, but I don't make the same amount of money doing what I do now that I did working corporate. And that was definitely something that I kind of had to weigh when I did end up leaving my corporate job. So success to me now looks like meeting my own personal goals versus like corporate goals. And that could be as little as meeting, my monetary goal for the week. That could look like having, my best sales month ever, whether I've actually hit that goal or not. If it's still, if made my best sales month ever, that's still success in my eye. So it certainly has changed a bit.
It evolves. It evolves in so
Yes,
many ways. I love
yes,
that. Well,
yes,
actually, you brought a good point because I came from corporate world and now own my business too, and it's a different game, right? And I
absolutely.
think that one of the questions a lot of women, especially when they're progressing and growing their business, is they start thinking about the future. And the women I speak with in their careers, they're very successful. They have successful businesses, and they're doing incredible well. But
Mhm.
what success usually comes with is long hours of work and a lot
Yeah,
of responsibility, right?
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and some of these women start thinking about the future when they want to keep the same kind of level of income,
Mhm.
but they don't want to work so hard for it, right? Which it's great a different mindset, right?
Yeah.
And they start asking questions: how do I create more income beyond the work they do?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts around that? Like, some examples is someone start investing in stocks, bonds, real estate, get financial planners, but also you started a business. What are your thoughts about creating income outside of work?
That is something that is constantly on my mind, I'll be honest. Like I mentioned, I when I worked corporate, you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks for the most part. Like what you're making. There's potential to have, stock options and you got benefits and everything. I walked away from all of that when I started this business. Or I guess when I left my corporate job. And I knew that that was a risk that I was going to take. And so it certainly is, it's not for the faint of heart to leave the structure and the stability of a corporate job and go and start your own business that you're really passionate about. It's hard work. You're absolutely right. There's late hours. I work totally random, but the joy of it is that I can work when I want to. I don't have to be at a desk from 9 to 5 every single day. And that is something that I was willing to, to give up. But of course, you got to make money to like live, and the world is so expensive. Like it's getting more and more expensive every single year. And so I always wonder like how can I be doing a little bit more? How can I, reach my financial goals? Um, to make sure that I'm good for the future and that like my family's good for the future. And so that definitely is something that I'm always thinking about. And I think there's something to be said about having multiple income streams. And prior to, gosh, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago, I did have multiple income streams. I was working other jobs as well as, working on She's Thrifty like that to try and get that to the point where it is now, where it basically is my full-time job. And then I do a little things on the side here and there to try and like counteract if I've had a bad month or, if something horrible happens in the world where like people really aren't spending their extra income on clothing, which I totally understand. I mean, that's it's a more of a I'm kind of in a business where like this is more of a luxury, not a need. So I'm grateful that I can make what I make every single month,
Yeah.
because I'm not selling something that everybody needs every single day, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And kudos to you, girl, because you have been succeeding in a business as you mentioned that is challenging, ever changing all the
Yeah,
time, every
honestly.
day.
Yes.
So
And
kudos to
yeah.
you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Seriously. I probably talking about it, I'm excited about it and I'm very proud of what it's become, but it's been a challenge and I will tell you that. And it's definitely, like I said, this isn't something that happened overnight and I'm still growing. I'm certainly not where I want to be with this business, but I've seen the growth every year and I've seen that like it is possible. So I keep telling myself like don't give up, keep doing it. Like you're building something from nothing basically. So
Yes, I love it. I mean, what you're doing also requires a lot of resilience. Where do
Mhm.
you think that resilience came from?
Oh, that's a good question. I was always very involved, I guess, growing up. I always was very driven. And I also think just like, going back to your question about success, like what does success look for? Like I've always wanted to succeed in whatever I'm doing and feel like because I'll obviously like failing is always going to be a part of starting something new or going down a new venture. And you learn a lot from that too. But I think there's also like success in failing sometimes because you learn from that.
Yeah.
So, and that was always the case growing up, it was like I was always involved in sports and, I was always really involved in school. And even in college, like doing extracurricular things like fashion shows and all that type of stuff. And I feel like I always wanted to try and put my best foot forward. So I guess that kind of is where my resilience comes from. And even if I fail or even if I'm not the absolute best, if I feel like I've done my best or put my best foot forward, then that feels like success to me.
Yes, 100%. I'm going to ask you this because I come from a sports world too. What
Mm.
type of a sport do you practice, and how did that sport impact your character?
Ooh, that's a great question. Um, so yeah, growing up, I know I don't look like it now, but I was a tomboy. I was Miss Athletic. I ran track, I played basketball, and then I also did volleyball all throughout high school, and I ended up running track a year in college as well at a very small school. But um, sports definitely it was it taught me how to be part of a team too, which was great for like the corporate life. But then also like with track, you also have your own individual success because, even though in track you're part of a team, you also have individual events. So I was a jumper, and that definitely was something where, I had to help carry my team in meets, but then like I had to make sure that I was good, always showing up for practice and having a good attitude and trying to put my best foot forward and staying on top of like what I was eating and making sure that, my head was right for meets so that I was doing my part both individually and for the team. So I think that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah.
Teamwork was one of those, but also it gave you the opportunity to show your talents when it was needed. So
Yes.
you got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's always challenges in sports too. I mean, it's definitely like, you're having to deal with a loss or, and I never took that well growing up.
Mhm.
I'll say that, like and like in basketball, I remember I would have some tough nights when we would go to a game and we would have a tough loss and but you have to bounce back. And again, that goes back to your point about resilience and knowing that like that feeling isn't going to stick around forever, like bounce back and come back better the next time if you can. And a lot of it is about attitude as well. So
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely about attitude is so important. Um, well, let me ask you this. What, because I think that there's so much happening and it has evolved so many ways. So we talk about fashion, how you evolve in the business world, the sports, how it helped you build that character, and
Mhm.
what women are looking for. Now, when it comes to your industry or something that you think it's important or worthy to have a conversation, what is a conversation you wish more women were having but are not yet?
Oof. That's a great one. I think the first thing that comes to mind would maybe be around like financial independence.
Mm,
I think that that's something that seems more common maybe with men than it does with women. And um, up until a couple years ago, I was, single. I have a boyfriend now and we live together, which is wonderful and it certainly helps to like offset, costs of living and everything. But prior to that, I had always lived alone. And I think sometimes as a woman, I never felt like I knew a lot of other women that I could necessarily go to talk about finances, where it felt like like just like an open and maybe just an easy conversation that wasn't judgmental.
yeah.
I think that would be, and even still to this day, I think that talking finances sometimes between your friends is kind of taboo. So sometimes a lot of people just don't do it, which I understand because I feel like there's a lot of ego attached to, your income and finances and stuff like that. And especially, in the world that we live in, it's kind of like you are what you make.
Yeah.
And that can be daunting a lot of times, especially between females and especially maybe female entrepreneurs. So sometimes I wish that was a little bit more of a free-flowing conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's you touch in so many points. There's so much emotions attached to money,
Absolutely. Hmm.
seeing it as the outcome. And I think that one of the things I learned from the best coaches in sports is we spend too much time attached to the outcome instead of the journey and the everyday activities that lead you
Sure.
to do that
Yes.
outcome.
Hmm.
And when people are judging, they're judging based on that outcome. And that's the part that becomes pretty interesting, right, Journey? Because
Yeah.
there's shame, there's pride, there is ego, there is love, there's confidence, there's so many emotions. And it's it always amazed me, right, to listen to people, not only how they feel about it, but how they judge about it.
Yes.
And to your point, I love to have those conversations, right? Because it's a
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
And yes, and for
Absolutely.
me, it's always been about a spiritual journey, right? The better I become as a human being, the more I understand how, yes, money can be a tool and
Mhm.
open opportunities, but if you don't know how to lead it and you don't know how to think about wealth, it just repels you automatically. And it's
Sure.
pretty interesting. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm with
Absolutely.
you. I'm with you on that one.
Definitely. No, you're so right. And yeah, I think a lot of people, like I mentioned, they judge you on what you make, not who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I struggle with sometimes.
Yes, yes, it
I
is.
would way much rather be judged for who I am as a person and how I made you feel versus, how much money I make and, you know, my wealth, I suppose.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. And I mean, it's so interesting, right? Especially in the industry you are, you start showing women how to dress. And I will say it's more about how they feel
Mhm.
than what the brand is.
Yeah. No, that's true. Definitely. Yeah.
Yes, I did have a friend that she used to work for Prada in France, and she came in and we
Mhm.
have that deep conversation about who you are, Jen, right?
Yeah.
How does this piece make you feel without the brand, right?
Yeah.
Let's
Yep.
think that there's no brand. And it
Mhm.
was so interesting. And of course, I bet that you deal with this often. Is there any advice before we let you go? Well, we
Yeah.
have two more questions, but is there any advice that you want to give women on how to pick clothes when it comes to dressing, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could talk about this for a long time, but I won't. Um, so I guess as somebody who worked in the fashion industry, and I always tell all of my friends because you can't tell from what I'm wearing right now, but I have a pretty outlandish, very colorful way of dressing. And I always tell my friends, like, wear what makes you feel confident. Now, of course, like, I also am a huge proponent of shopping, obviously at thrift stores, shopping resale, buying somewhat sustainable pieces. I mean, it's so hard with sustainability nowadays because it's like you don't truly really know where all the clothes are coming from. But, I'm a big proponent of not shopping fast fashion. I try not to shop personally at like a lot of mall brands. A lot of these online stores that are popping up like Shein and Boohoo and, that are really, really cheap and really bad for the environment. As somebody who is in this industry, I see those more than any other brand at the thrift stores. And that shows me that like people are, over consuming. They're buying these clothes for really, really cheap prices, and they might wear them once and then discard them, but nobody else wants them because they're not well made. And, it's poor materials, poor quality. And so, along with dressing how you want to dress and dressing confidently and wearing what you want to wear, I'm also just a big proponent of like trying to do your research and knowing like what brands align with your values so that
Hmm.
people can make smarter choices when they are shopping and also not be afraid of resale. It's in my opinion, it's better to spend $100 on a piece that will last you, years versus spending $100 on 10 pieces that you may or may not even wear once. And
Correct.
then through, discarding them and then nobody wants them because the value is not there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love it. It's like a combination of shopping with alignment with who you are
Absolutely.
without losing the value.
Absolutely. And I'm always like, you can find really good pieces and get deals on them. And you just, I know just a lot of people don't like to shop. So I understand that, for those people, it's a little bit harder, but that's where I come in. Let me
You
shop
can do
for you.
it. You
Yeah,
can get that
I'll
done.
shop for you and then you don't have to do it. And then I'll help build, a wardrobe that you're really proud of. So that's where I'd love to get to that point where I do work with people consistently, where I'm helping them really build a closet that they love versus just one that has just happened because they need the clothes, or impulse buys.
Hey, Katie, I have to ask you this. We didn't touch it in the regular interview.
Yes.
I heard that you moved in 3 months from where to where. What happened? How was that transition, girl?
Yeah, so it was a wild life choice, honestly. So 2021, I was still working corporate, but it was kind of at the end tail of COVID. And so I was working from home at that point in time because our office was shut down. And I used to live in Portland, Oregon, and I was really just wanting a life change. My corporate job it was great, it was stable, but it just wasn't fulfilling me anymore. And I was ready to move to a different city. And things just kind of fell into place when I decided to leave my corporate job in October of 21 and I lived in Dallas, Texas by late February of 2022. So it was a really quick transition. And I moved here to Dallas, which is where I am now, without a job. I didn't really know anybody. It was really just like I wanted this for myself. And I knew that I had to kind of like rely on me and my drive and my ability to, figure out what I was going to do for a job and make friends and everything. So it was one of the most exciting and also one of the most scary things that I've ever done in my life. I've haven't gone through a ton of like change throughout my life, so it was just something that I wanted to see if I could do. And then that's kind of again once I moved down here, I obviously like did odds and end jobs and did part-time jobs here and there to make ends meet, but then that's how She's Thrifty like that started. And I really don't think it would be where it is today if I hadn't made that move. It certainly wouldn't be, it probably wouldn't even exist if I hadn't left my corporate job. I don't know. But but yeah, if I hadn't, bet on myself basically, then I wouldn't have this business that I am really, really proud of today. So
Wow.
it's kind of to show people that if you believe in yourself and have the drive and the energy to make a change, do it because you'll be really proud of yourself.
Oh, I love that. I
Yeah,
mean, it's bet on yourself. Love it. Believe in
absolutely.
yourself. Well, thank
Yes, yes.
you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes. Awesome. Love it. So when people want to connect with you, because they want to work with you, Katey,
Yeah.
what's the best way to connect with you?
So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, whether it's through my Instagram, or I recently started a YouTube, or they can shoot me an email. So I have some links somewhere that I can send if you'd like them. My Instagram is at She's Thrifty Like That, and just an easy DM or a message. But I think in there in my bio it has a link to all of my pages where it's really easy to either shop with me or learn more about consignment. And then my YouTube I started maybe a couple months ago, so it's still new, but it's been really fun to make like thrift haul videos and stuff. And people can always reach out there too. They can comment on my YouTube, or just shoot me an email if anyone is ever interested in learning more about my consignment process, at she's thrifty like that at Gmail. So
Awesome.
yeah, I'm pretty easy to find and get a hold of. I don't think anybody else uses my She's Thrifty Like That handles anywhere. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Katey, so much for
Yes,
joining us, for being so refreshing, sharing your
absolutely.
boldness and your changes in your life. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation. Hopefully everyone enjoyed listening as well.
You've been listening to Catch Her Spark with Jen Maldonado, where bold women lead the way. Ready to share your spark? Apply to be a guest at catchherspark.com/guest.